Hi, my name is Kristin and my project is The Effects of the COVID-19 Pandemic on the Education of Nursing Through Oral History. So my name is Kristin. I'm a political science major with a minor in history. And I'd like to offer a big thank you to Dr. Cora Granata, who served as my mentor for this project. Her support and guidance was absolutely instrumental to helping it come to its completion, and I want to thank you, Dr. Granata, for all your help. I'd also like to give a special thanks to Natalie Garcia, the archivist at the Lawrence DeGraff Center for Oral and Public History, as well as a thank you to the staff of the Lawrence DeGraff Center. So to begin, why oral history? I selected oral history as my methodology for three key reasons. The first is that it provides qualitative data. The second is that it can reveal information otherwise previously unconsidered by the interviewer. And the third is that it allows the narrator to tell their story exactly how they perceive it, which means that oral history results in a holistic story, one that allows the interviewer to share information that otherwise may not have been gleaned in a survey format, as well as allows the interviewee to explain their experiences in a genuine way, exactly how they perceive it. So the process for conducting an oral history begins with identifying your question of interest. So what is the time period, event, or person you want to know more about? You then identify potential narrators who can help you answer this question, and then contact them. Once you do so, you conduct a pre-interview with them. After this, you refine and prepare your questions for the oral interview itself, and then you conduct the oral history interview. After the oral history interview is complete, you then transcribe that interview, so that you have both an audio recording of it as well as a written transcription of it. So to begin my project, I formed my question of interest. And my question of interest is, how did the COVID-19 pandemic affect the education of students who are interested in pursuing a career in nursing? The first interviewee was Cassandra Lopez, who I interviewed on October 19th, 2021. I interviewed Cassandra in my home in Placentia, California. And the reason I selected Cassandra is because she's a recent graduate from the nursing program at Cal State San Marcos. The second person I interviewed was Kaylee Pungetti, and I interviewed her on November 24th, 2021, also in my home in Placentia, California. The reason I selected Kaylee is that she's a nursing student at Regis University. And Kaylee's interview was very interesting, as Regis University is located in Colorado, which meant that I got to ask Kaylee about the difference between her experiences during the pandemic, both in California and in Colorado, where her schooling took place. The third and final person I interviewed was Nicole Beach, and I interviewed her on April 15th, 2022. So Nicole's interview was conducted over Zoom, which meant that she was located in her home in Fresno, California, and I was located in my home in Placentia, California. I selected Nicole because she's a nursing student at Cal State Fullerton. So I've constructed a brief timeline to highlight when exactly I conducted my oral history interviews. As you can see, a great deal happened between 2019 and 2021 and 22, even in this abridged version of a timeline, which meant that our interviews didn't just focus on the education of nursing students, but also how the pandemic affected their medical and social lives as well. So in an excerpt from Cassandra's interview, she stated, "I'm a kinesthetic learner. I need to be able to feel, smell, touch, anything that would allow my five senses to all help me learn. But being at home did not give me that education that I truly needed to make sure that I was prepared for my license exam." Kaylee stated, "I do believe the pandemic put me at a slight disadvantage. Because it was just harder since I'm a tactile and visual learner, it was really hard for me to absorb and digest all the information that was being thrown at me over Zoom in the first 8 weeks of school." Nicole stated, "I do find that I am less inclined to speak up in a virtual class than I am in person, like whether it's to answer a question or ask questions." Kaylee also stated, "If I did not get to have my clinical rotations in person, I would not be comfortable being a nurse yet. Because you cannot learn to be a nurse online, in my opinion. That just seems really unrealistic because all of nursing is in person." Cassandra stated, I was a year away from taking my exit exam to get out of the program, which would mean that I would be going into a hospital and not using a nursing student cover to basically excuse any of the mistakes I made on the floor at that point. I started to realize I'm not going to be as prepared as I once thought I was going to be. So other information I discovered through my interviews is that other factors caused by the pandemic affected my interviewees' educational experience as well. So when I was forming my question of interest, I was primarily focusing on how being out of the classroom affected nursing students' education. However, through the interviews, I also found that isolation and lack of connection with friends and campus community also had an impact on their education as well. For example, Kaylee stated, I would just say that my mental health was affected a lot by the pandemic, in the worst way. Yeah, I would say my mental health was the worst it ever was during the pandemic, as would most people's, I would say. I contemplated quitting altogether. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Cassandra stated it was hard. Especially in nursing school, we have a lot of group projects, but people being scared to meet up in person, you have all these different personalities mixing with each other. You're not in person to help them per se, if a lot of them, like myself, are kinesthetic learners and kind of need that in-person experience. So the relevance to the academic body of knowledge of history, this ties back to the three reasons I selected oral history. The first being it provides qualitative data. So a lot of the COVID-19 pandemic has been represented through statistics. However, oral history provides a human story to the struggle of COVID-19 outside of those statistics. As historian Stephen Sloan states, the deep context that oral historians can draw out of the individual experience is something the dominant data set desperately lacks. Within this, oral historians can find creative ways to approach a fuller understanding of the individual and community experience from a variety of angles, providing deeper explorations of what has been lost, what has been gained, and what has been shaped in the in-between. The second reason is it can reveal information otherwise previously unconsidered by the interviewer. So initially, I focused on students' education outside the classroom and how that impacted whether or not they felt prepared for going into a career in nursing. However, I didn't consider how isolation and lack of connection with campus community also affected their academics. Through my narrator's experiences during COVID-19 and them sharing it with me, I was able to learn about this different facet of their experience and how it weighed on their educational experience. Third, oral history allows the narrator to tell the story exactly as they perceive it. So this means it grants future researchers direct insight into the perspective of an interviewee who lived during the COVID-19 pandemic, essentially creating a first-person resource for them in any future investigations. Oral history has also been known to help individuals who are going through traumatic experiences by recounting one's own experience with trauma. Oral history thus can be a cathartic process and allow interviewees to make sense and draw meaning from their experience. Living through the COVID-19 is undoubtedly a traumatic experience, and thus through their interview, my narrators, I hope, were able to draw meaning from their experience by recounting them. So in conclusion, my narrators expressed that being able to learn nursing skills in an in-person environment is an important part of a nursing education. So each of my interviewees had a different degree of in-person experience. For example, Cassandra was a nursing student who didn't get to complete in-person practicals and thus felt that her educational experience was lacking because of it. Kaylee, who got to spend some time online, but also got to conduct her practicals in person, felt that being able to learn certain skills in person was very important to her nursing education. And finally, Nicole, who was able to complete clinicals in person, but had to take her fundamentals course in the in-campus lab, stated that there are certain things that you need to learn in person, such as the day-to-day activities of a nurse, as well as how a hospital functions. However, overall, each of the stories they provided were rich with details and informative not only towards how COVID-19 affected the education of nursing students, but also how COVID and its many ramifications affected the daily lives of students, both medically and socially. Their contribution to the academic record enriches it by helping to provide firsthand accounts of one of the greatest events of our time, which will undoubtedly continue to be researched well into the future. Thank you.